you an opportunity to open us out with some opening remarks, as this is our short-term rental code compliance effort that Housing and Community Development Department will be presenting to you all tonight. And thank you for joining us, Supervisor Adams. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Eric. I primarily wanted to welcome everyone. It looks like we have a good attendance, 62 participants. I know this is an issue that is a very serious one to so many people in the 5th District. I particularly want to just express my appreciation to the staff, for Eric and Josh particularly, for taking the time to pull this kind of meeting together, because I think that what you're going to hear this evening will be encouraging for you, because I know that many people have been terribly discouraged by the slow progress we've been making on short-term rentals. But I think that Eric will probably allow time for questions throughout the presentation. And we've got a good amount of time set aside, so I won't take any more of your time other than just to say I'm staying here for it as well. I'm interested to hear not just what the presentation is, but also my strong interest is to hear from the residents. You're the ones I represent. Actually, I represent Eric as well. He's in my district. I don't know about Wendy, and I'm not sure about Josh, but at any rate, we're all in this together. And I look forward to the presentation. So Eric, thank you for holding off and letting me join in and say a couple of words of welcome to everyone.
Thank you. You're welcome, and thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Just the agenda, I don't know if you all received it, but it did go out late this afternoon. I can just go over it real briefly. We'll review some procedures and protocol for Zoom and conducting this webinar. We'll then go into permitting for various types of short-term rentals, which that term will be used loosely here for some discussion and more tightly for other components. Also, the term vacation rentals will be used. Also, the term, the transient use of residential properties for remuneration will be used. You also hear bed and breakfast. Those are all types of visitor accommodations, whether permitted currently in the county or currently not. Also go into our approach on code compliance based on direction that we have received from the Board of Supervisors. Then follow up with our code compliance procedures. And then at that time, we will allow questions on our code compliance procedures. Want to limit those to 60 seconds. I think that provides enough time to express the question that you may have, and then staff will follow up with a response. I do hope that we will have a response, but there may be an occasion where we don't, but we will be taking down names and can follow up based on the questions that's received if we are not able to answer completely the question that's being asked. This meeting is being recorded, so it will be ultimately published on the department's website. For those of you that in attendance tonight can rewatch, or those not can watch and be able to understand the complexities of this topic that we're discussing tonight. And then we'll follow up after the question period with some closing remarks. So regarding the Zoom protocol, I would ask that the public generally keep their audio and videos off or muted, and the videos off. This will help with bandwidth as we present the items and those that may be in areas with not very good Wi-Fi service or internet service. Also, if you do have a question during the question and answer period, there is a reactions button at the bottom of your screen. If you press on that, you will be able to raise and lower your hand. There is also, if you're calling in from a landline, which I'm not sure that I see any here tonight. So, oh yeah, there's a couple. So if you are on the landline and you do wish to unmute yourself, press *6. And then to raise your hand, you'll be pressing *9. This is a very complex issue that we are going to be discussing tonight. I understand there are positions on either side of the fence, so to speak. Those that are in support of allowing vacation rentals as well as those that would like to limit them or restrict them. I'm hoping tonight that we can be civil in our approach. This isn't a debate of whether which one is correct or which one is not. This is an informational session that allows the Housing and Community Development Department to share with you all the existing regulations that have been adopted for the county that the Housing and Community Development Department is charged with enforcing. I will say, though, that the Board of Supervisors has directed the Housing and Community Development Department to consider an update to the existing ordinances and to prepare an environmental impact report to assess the environmental effects related to those two ordinances. This conversation tonight is not about the environmental impact report, nor about the draft ordinances that are currently being reviewed and will ultimately be brought forward to the Board of Supervisors for its consideration in the future. Today's conversation is based on the direction that we received from the Board of Supervisors to proactively enforce the unauthorized short-term rentals currently existing within District 5 in the inland areas of District 5. And our approach that was expressed to the Board of Supervisors some time ago now was to first enforce based on those operators not paying transient occupancy tax or TOT for those nightly stays. And for the benefit of the group, transient occupancy tax is due for any stay less than 30 days. Once we get through the enforcement effort of that grouping, we will then begin a more broad, proactive enforcement of unauthorized short-term rentals. And there are quite a few of them currently operating within District 5 within the inland areas. So what are our existing regulations and how would one become legal? In 2015, the then Department Resource Management Agency put together a memo that was subsequently revised in 2016 by the then directors Mike Novo and Carl Holm. The regulations still exist as they did then, so this memo is still very much appropriate. I think I'll take the opportunity to share my screen so you all can follow along as I go through the memo. So you're seeing the memo here that is on the county's website, and these are the dates that were referenced. It is related to regulations relative to the transient use of residential properties. So what is the transient use of residential properties? Well, it's the use of a residential property for a stay less than 30 days. The county is broken up into two areas, the inland area and the coastal zones. So the applicable regulations in the inland areas are sections 21.64 280, which speaks to administrative permits for the transient use of residential properties for remuneration. We also have provisions for bed and breakfast that are contained in section 21.64100, titled the bed and breakfast facilities. In the coastal zone, we also have provisions for bed and breakfast facilities. When the county originally adopted the inland provisions, the administrative permits for transient residential uses, the coastal zone did not certify that ordinance. And as a result, that particular provision is not allowed in the coastal zone. However, there is provision for applying for a similar use determination in the coastal zone, and in essence, obtaining the same allowance. Bed and breakfast facilities do have certain standards that they must operate, and they are contained within the sections 21.06.110 and 21.06.110. And they are allowed within certain zoning districts. As I mentioned, they're both in the coastal zone and in the inland. There is a differentiation between the transient use of residential properties for remuneration. Primarily, that use is only allowed to be rented for 7 to 30 days and may be allowed with an administrative use permit in comparison to a use permit. The difference being the review authority. An administrative use permit is subject to the director of planning or the chief of planning's decision. There is discussion in the memo on the history of how these ordinances were developed. I won't go into those today because I touched on it a little bit. Ultimately, the discussion leads us to where we are today, which is receiving the board's direction to update the ordinances. However, these ordinances are currently in effect, and those not currently entitled to operate are considered to be unauthorized and will be subject to our enforcement efforts, as I just mentioned. I would like to now take the opportunity to introduce, and I believe some of them are here with us tonight, our enforcement team, beginning with Josh Bowling, our Chief of Building Services, who leads the compliance team with our Building Services Manager, Evan Knuckles. Our two code compliance officers, Wendy Martin and Ramon Montano, are also here tonight listening in. As we proceed forward with our compliance efforts, you can contact these individuals for other questions, and you may be seeing their names on information being produced from the department. Our code compliance approach in District 5, as I mentioned, will be first starting with the unauthorized vacation rentals not paying transient occupancy tax. We will be initiating a courtesy notice here towards the end of the month that will go out to all operators, not only that grouping, but all operators, indicating that the Housing and Community Development Department will begin enforcement efforts. That will be a 30-day notice, indicating that at the end of the 30 days, that a subsequent notice will be coming out asking for those that are not currently permitted to cease operations within the next 30 days. Our code enforcement efforts are generally to seek voluntary compliance. So having operators either cease operations voluntarily without having to use our abatement tools, or to seek in good faith the necessary permits, as we just discussed, either the use permit for the bed and breakfast, the administrative permit for the transient use of residential properties in the inland areas, or in the coastal zones seeking a similar use determination or a use permit for a bed and breakfast. If within that subsequent 30 days, the operations have not ceased, we will be submitting a notice of violation. The notice of violation will indicate that the operations must cease immediately, and if not, at the end of the next 30 days, the use has not ceased, then penalties and fines will begin to toll. So just to recap, there's a courtesy notice of 30 days, a subsequent 30-day notice, and the notice of violation providing another 30 days before penalties will start to begin to occur. So that's a 90-day period. During those 90-day period, the operation again should cease, giving those that are currently operating the ability to cancel reservations, knowing that people may be coming from out of the country or out of the state. We're providing ample time in order for those stays beyond that 90 days to be accommodated elsewhere. And during that initial 90 days can continue to occur on the property, knowing though that at the end of those 90 days, we will be proactively enforcing the regulations. If an operator wants to continue to exist after the notice of violation and at the end of those 30 days, the department will begin tolling the violations, even if the operator comes in and seeks the proper permit. Currently, the violations for an unauthorized activity are $100 for the first day, first offense, $200 the subsequent day, and then $500 every day thereafter. We realize this may not be a disincentive for some, As a result, we will be going forward to the Board of Supervisors with an ordinance suggesting an increase in the penalties. Staff's suggestion will likely be a percentage of the advertised nightly stay. During that period, though, if the operator continues to exist and would like to file an application for a permit, they may do so, but knowing those penalties will continue to toll. There are provisions under the Permit Streamlining Act that require the department to act in response to applications. And so as long as the operator and the county are continuing to maintain a cadence of seeking the necessary permits, then there will not be further action aside from tolling those penalties, which will then be collected upon approval or denial. There are application fees. Application fees are doubled at the time of submittal for unauthorized operators. If one chooses not to cease operations or to seek the necessary permits, then we will be using our administrative remedies through an administrative hearing process. Ultimately, once the decision is made, the matter will be resolved at that point at the county unless there's further legal action. I will stop at this point to allow my colleagues an opportunity to address anything I missed. If Josh, Wendy, Ramon would like, or Evan would like to add, please feel free to do so at this time.
Good afternoon, Eric. This is Joshua Bowling. I just wanted to kind of go over the scenario for an unpermitted use of the residence as it relates to the fines, just to be clear for everybody. To clarify, the 100, 200, and then 500, just as an example, if you rented the place Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, then you would add all those up. So for that one rental weekend, there's 3 days of violations, which would then total $800. And so I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that. Thank you.
Josh, would you describe the recordation of the pendency upon the property upon the notice of violation?
Sure. So once we issue a notice of violation and the violation's been confirmed and the property owners afforded the opportunity to provide evidence that there is no violation. So if unable to do that and the violation is confirmed, at that point, the staff will record a pendency through the recorder's office that there's a current violation on the property, and then that would run with the property until the violation's cleared. So if anybody's doing a title search for a loan, a sale, a refinance, that pendency would show up on their parcel record.
Great, thank you for that, Josh. Do any of my other colleagues have anything else to add before we move on to questions? I believe our code compliance procedures are pretty straightforward and simple. And I would just, again, stress the reason we're doing this is we want to make sure that the public is aware that we are going out based on the board's directive and proactively enforcing our regulations. But we do have a number of unregulated short-term rentals within District 5 in the inland areas. And so we're breaking it up in a means. Thank you. Based on our current staffing resources, we currently do have 2 staff members, as I mentioned, that will be dedicated to enforcement during the week as well as on the weekends. And we are monitoring the various websites that are advertising these short-term rentals. And so at this point, I think it would be proper if we begin our questions. If I could get the hands raised, I'll begin calling on individuals once I see a number of hands. And again, I would like to limit the questions to 60 seconds. And if you've already heard a question that is asked that was one you were going to ask, I don't know that it would be beneficial to restate it. So if you could put your hand down if you do hear that question being asked that you were going to ask, or perhaps if you have a different question, that's okay too. but want to get to everybody. And I won't be keeping time on the screen, but I will be keeping time on my phone here. I would like to limit the questions to 60 seconds so we can get through all the questions in efficient manner. So now that I'm seeing a few hands, I will call on the individuals that I see first. And I see Kay Austin. You're free to unmute and ask your question. Okay. Okay, we'll come back to Kay. I see Richard Rosenthal.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Eric. I have a couple questions, actually. One to Josh Bowling. How are you receiving complaints from homeowners that reside next to STRs?
Yes, thank you, Richard. So we can receive complaints multiple ways. One is either they can call in our call center at 831-755-5025. They can also submit a complaint online through our Acela Citizens Access, and they can also submit a form. We have a form online they can fill out and either email it in to our code compliance email or mail it in through the regular mail. So we have about 3 or 4 different ways they can submit a complaint.
How have you received complaints in the last 2 weeks?
I have not, I personally haven't received any complaints in the last 2 weeks. I would need to follow up with staff and see if any have come in through our call center.
Okay, and then how do you verify that a complaint is actually a complaint? That there's noise and that type of thing.
One, if it's a noise complaint, we have 2 options. One would be one of our weekend code enforcement officers would go out and verify the noise. Or if the report was filed with the sheriffs and the sheriffs completed a site visit, they would share their report with us.
So it's really after the fact, unless it's you report it to the sheriff, but your office isn't going to get out there during the activity that's generating the noise.
No, our staff does go out during the noise event. We have a staff person that works evenings. And so if they receive a complaint through our noise complaint hotline, they receive that call, and based on location and time and however many other noise complaints they have, they'll work on getting out there to visually to hear that noise complaint.
And how many of those noise complaints in the last month are you aware of, if any?
In the last month, I don't know the number offhand, but due to it being winter and the rainy season, there's been less complaints than typically during the summertime.
And how would I make a public records request for this data?
Through our regular public records request process, and then we can gather that information for you.
And how would I describe it? How would you like me to describe it so you understand?
You could ask for the reported noise complaints, and if you want, how those were followed up on, then you'd be able to do that. If there's any additional documentation, notices of violations written, the typical request for information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kay is unmuted now. Kay, can you hear us? Okay, Austin? No? Okay, we'll go to Jessica. Oh, there you go. Okay, we can hear you now if you'd like to ask your question.
So it never asked us for the supplemental down here.
Sorry, Kay, your audio is not coming in clearly. We'll move on to Jesse Wilson. Jesse, you're free to unmute and ask a question. Jesse,
Yeah, okay, I got it. Great, thank you. Just having trouble unmuting. So my question is, I haven't started a short-term rental yet, and I want to put in for the application. Do I have to wait to be approved to start? Or can I start paying TOT tax and go into action since I put in my application?
you need to wait to start until you receive your entitlement.
And how long do you think that will take?
It depends on the nature of your request. The administrative permit can vary depending on the appropriate authority. They are typically subject to an administrative permit, subject to the Director of Planning's review. And that takes about 3 to 4 months to find approval. If there is controversy on the application and it is appealed to a higher authority, then that takes additional time.
Okay, so let's just say that there's no controversy. It's a straightforward. I apply for it. It goes through the normal channels. What are we looking at? 6 months, a year?
6 months to approval. There will be conditions of approval potentially that you'll need to satisfy. And that's if you have a complete application submitted.
And if I start operating before then I'm going to be subject to these fines you're speaking of?
Correct.
And once I get the permit, I'll have to pay those fines?
Yes.
But if my,
No, I'm sorry, just for clarity, if you're not entitled now and you begin operations, we will demand ceasing operations until you receive the necessary entitlement.
even though I put in for my permit?
Yes.
And, but if I'm renting for 30 days at a time, then I don't have to pay TOT tax and I don't need to get a permit.
That's correct.
And what will the permit process cost approximately?
It depends on if you're in the inland area or the coastal zone.
Inland area.
Inland area, it's about $8,000.
And does that guarantee that I'll get the permit, or if I don't get it, the $8,000 is gone?
It is not a guarantee. The $8,000 covers staff time to process the application.
Will this be going up for a public vote, or is this going to be just seen by the politicians, or will it be able to be public vote onto whether or not this is going to continue this way?
If you are applying for an administrative use permit for a transient use of residential property, it is subject to the Director of Planning's decision unless it's appealed to a higher review authority.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for your questions. I see Jeff Hawkins next.
Thank you, Eric. My question is with regards to Carmel Valley. Can you state, is there a specific limit on the number of short-term rentals that are allowed in Carmel Valley? And I'm assuming the county has a website that shows a listing or a map of where those are located.
There is not currently a limitation on the number of permits that may be issued within Carmel Valley. We do have information on our website related to short-term rentals. It can be found by visiting co.monterey.ca.us and then navigating to the Housing and Community Development Department. And we have a tab there under the table of contents related to short-term rentals. We are posting pending permits on that website.
So you indicated in the previous question that it takes approximately 6 months. Did I hear that correct, for the permit to physically go through the process?
That's correct, once we receive the formal application.
The last question is, how does the county verify that the TOT is correct? What documentation does the short-term rental person have to provide to show that they're paying the correct amount, etc.?
That the payment of transient occupancy tax is handled through our tax collector's office. And so that question should be asked of them, how that information is vetted and made certain that it's accurate.
Okay, so you don't know off the top of your head what documentation is needed for justifying that payment?
We don't handle the collection of the transient occupancy tax. That's handled through our tax collector's office.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for your questions, Jeff. Let's see, Rachel.
Yes, my question is this: if a short-term rental owner decides not to go forward with a permit and ceases operations and rents for 30 days or more, but now and then in unoccupied times donates a weekend to a local charity by way of a silent auction, something in that regard, is that considered a violation? If a weekend is donated, there's no money changing hands, it's simply the money goes to the charity, can the county consider that a violation?
Yes, that can be considered a violation.
So in essence, that would shut down any huge donations that could be collected by local charities.
Unless the property has the proper permits.
Has this been discussed among the department, or is this the first time, a question of first impression?
No, it's been contemplated. We are aware of that occurring, and there are other unique circumstances that occur from time to time. In the it doesn't depend on who or what and what means they're coming in. If the stay is less than 30 days, then they are subject to the regulations.
And what if the property is kept for personal use and now and then guests or family members are granted the option to stay in the house, but it's not rented out, it's just for family? Is that the same category?
No. That would be different.
So if a charitable contribution is made and it's discovered that it was from a situation I just described, what kind of confirmation efforts is the county going to make to see whether it's simply personal use, family, friends, or donated for use of a charity?
There's an investigation period. If we on complaint or through our proactive efforts of information related to the possibility of a unauthorized use, then we need to do the investigation. If we gather evidence that indicates that there is a violation, we proceed with the code enforcement or code compliance actions.
That's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, is it Raquel? I'm sorry. If
Rochelle.
Rochelle, thank you. Jonathan.
You may have already covered this, but it's kind of a follow-up to the gentleman that was asking about his short-term rental. Are there different fees associated for different styles of short-term rental? And I'm referencing maybe like an ADU instead of renting an entire house. Is that enforced or viewed differently from a cost or permitting perspective?
It is not different. Although if the board should, once it considers, and if it should adopt our proposed regulations, the difference would be based on the nightly rents. You might fetch a larger nightly rate for a single family home compared to an ADU. I would say that state law and our regulations do prohibit the rental of an ADU for short-term rental.
Oh, state law prohibits the rental of an ADU or a studio for short-term rentals?
Yes.
Got it. That's it. Thank you.
Welcome. Steve Martin.
Yes, I know you stated that this discussion and the enforcement is related or specifically with regards to inland areas. Could you maybe just summarize what the thinking is with regard to coastal zone and why that's excluded from this effort?
Yeah, in part, it's related to our workforce. We have a limited number of staff. We have a fairly large portfolio of code compliance cases. And this is an effort to be able to move forward systematically through those cases in an effort that is efficient for the department. The other issue that we are confronted with is the Coastal Commission has a slightly different opinion of the current regulations. And so we're working with them on that opinion.
I see. So there's at least the possibility that in the future you might follow up with a similar activity in the coastal zone?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome, thanks, Steve. Jack Egler?
Yes, I have a question. I just heard you say something that surprised me, so I want to be clear. So if you have an ADU, you're saying you cannot get a permit for short-term rental on an ADU?
Yeah, that is my understanding.
So the only thing you can do is, so the only short-term rentals are if it's an in-house situation?
Or if it's a unit that's not considered an accessory dwelling unit.
Really? Okay, and you're saying that's a state law?
That is my understanding.
Do you have a reference for that?
I can provide it, surely. I will say,
Okay.
we have I don't know, Jack, if you want to provide your contact information, but we do have a mailing list that perhaps you were on it and the others might be interested in this too. I can provide it out to that mailing list.
Yeah, I got the email. If I respond back to the email that I got tonight, would that, to spec for this meeting, would that work to?
And actually, I think for the benefit of the group, I'm happy to do that for the benefit of the group here. So
Okay.
it's where.
Okay, yeah, I'll respond back and to all, I guess, and then you could send that out. I was not aware of that, and I'd be interested to find out about that. The second question I had real briefly was the yearly fee. I know you said about $8,000 for getting the administrative permit approximately. What is the yearly fee?
There is no yearly fee. You will continue to meet the obligations of your conditions.
Okay,
So there's one of the conditions will be to pay the transient occupancy tax.
okay.
Yeah.
Do you have to renew the administrative permit then? Or is it just stay in? Okay,
Not under the code as it's currently provided, although
Okay.
the permit is a discretionary permit.
right.
So if the decision maker has cause or reason to integrate a term, be it a sunset clause or some other provision for
Right.
renewal, then they have that discretion.
Okay, good. All right, thank you very much. That answers my question.
David? I guess.
Yes, hi. So it's been taking roughly like 6 months to get a permit, right? And we probably have, I don't know, 500, 600 unpermitted STRs who will now be seeking permits, or some portion, maybe half will be seeking permits. So that wait, what do you think that wait time will be? Will it run into years? And another question was, I had been under the impression that while we were seeking permits, that we'd be allowed to continue to operate. I thought you had expressed that publicly. So that seems to be changing also?
No, the differentiation is between those that are currently operating and the one that might not be operating today and then, want to operate as they're filing a permit. The proper process is to obtain the entitlement and then begin operations once the entitlement has been approved.
Oh, but what about people, I'm sorry, people operating today, is what I was kind of referring to.
Right, so those operating today have the decision to continue to operate as they're seeking the necessary entitlements, but knowing that the fees and penalties will continue to exist. or toll. And if at any point during the processing of the application, we discover that that operator is no longer processing the application in good faith, then we will begin the necessary administrative remedies to close that operation. And when I say in good faith, the way the permitting process is established locally as well as by state provision is that there are review periods. So, you know, upon an application submittal, the county's provided 30 days to deem it complete. Then at that time, if it's deemed complete or incomplete, the county will set the next timeline, you know, depending on the nature of the incompleteness. If there's minor things, the county may set another 30 days to submit the information. So if we're working in good cadence towards the consideration of that use permit, the use can continue to operate, but knowing those penalties will continue to toll. And although they're $100, $200, and $500 now, staff's recommendation is that they be elevated such that they are a substantial disincentive to continue to operate.
But Eric, if I get that right, I mean, and I'll give an example, you know, someone who's charging $200 a night, you're saying, oh yeah, you can continue to operate while you're seeking a permit, but just know that you'll have a $500 a day penalty that might be more. So,
yep.
So I guess what you're saying then is that everybody must cease even while they're applying for permits in good faith.
Yeah, in your example, I would think that one would cease, although admittedly, I think some of the operations out there are charging, you know, $10,000 a night. So, you know, 500 is maybe pennies to your example. But ultimately, I do hope that the penalties and this increase is supported by the full board, and that it does make a disincentive for those to continue to operate without the benefit of permit.
Well, I mean, you look on a website, you know, look on Airbnb, and most are way under $500, or some are charging $700. I don't think they'll want to pay a $500 fee. So it sounds like essentially while we're seeking permits, we have to cease. And if permits, they're like 25, 30 permits out there now issued over the last many, many years. If 300-400 of us come forward and seek permits, that might take years and years and years. So yeah, essentially, it sounds like the whole industry is just, you know, being shut down.
We would like you to come in and seek permits.
Sorry?
I said we would like you to come in and seek permits, and your characterization is correct. The intent is that you seek permits.
But it will take years for a couple hundred permits to be issued, many, many years.
I can't respond to that. Our hope is that we have the permits coming in, and if we need to accommodate our workforce to handle that, we will be asking the board for that direction.
And what about for the last 6 years, we've been kind of waiting for a new permitting process to be introduced. It's gone back and forth. Is that effort now gone? And the only thing is the permits that existed many, many years ago?
I'm not sure I understand the question. It sounded like it was starting to talk about the ordinances, but our effort.
Yes, the ordinances, the permits.
Yeah, our effort here tonight is to talk about our existing ordinances and the enforcement of the existing ordinances.
But so many people didn't go to seek permits under the existing ordinances because we've been waiting for a new ordinance. Is that effort now done with?
I would ask that you make application under our existing code, which is what we are enforcing today.
Thanks, Eric.
You're welcome. Edwards. Edwards, I journey. That's right. Edwards, you're free to unmute. Ask a question.
Hello?
Yes, there you go.
Hi. Hey, I'm just trying to understand this. If there's 500 units in our inland area and you're charging $8,000 or so for the fees or more, and we have no guarantee that we're going to get them, that's $4 million worth of money beyond the 10.5% that we've been paying in TOTs for the last 12 years of operating without a single complaint. I want to know what would disqualify us from a permit.
I don't know the nature of your particular situation, but each application.
I'll tell you I'll tell you the particular situation is that we have lived on this land. I was born on the land that I live on. We are renting for the last 12 years as what do you call them? I forget what the term was when I went to these other meetings at the churches and everything else talking about this whole subject. And it was really upsetting to me because I've been a teacher, I've been a coach in this community, I've worked really hard. I have zero complaints from anybody, from neighbors or anybody, and we've paid our TOTs. And now you're asking for a fee that we don't even know, we can't even recoup if you decide arbitrarily that we don't qualify. I want to know what disqualifies us. And who sets those guidelines up? Who sets up the fees for these permits? They seem a little high to me. You know, I mean, we started off at $225 a night. You know, and that's all I have to say 12 years ago. All I have to say, it's pretty upsetting to me as someone who's worked in this community and in this county for a long time and devoted a lot of effort into our own community to be kind of penalized and treated like criminals. I just don't understand it. We've never had a complaint. And there's a lot of people that operate like us. We live on the property that we rent. We are not absentee owners. These big operations nearby
Edwards,
that are run by corporations.
I appreciate
We're not a
your comments.
corporation.
Edwards, I will answer your questions, but this isn't a debate. The fees are set by the Board of Supervisors based on a recommendation from Housing and Community Development Department. Each application is considered on its own merits. The criteria for which it's considered are based on the ordinance that was adopted by the board in 1997. So there are certain standards there. Although because it is discretionary and subject to CEQA, there is an environmental review based on the project scope. So all of those things are considered in the consideration of the application by the appropriate review authority. So I'll move on to Jesse. I see perhaps you have a legacy hand there.
No, I have another quick couple of questions. So if I want to allow people to park their motorhome on my property and charge a fee for that, is that considered a nightly rental?
It is.
It is. And if I allow people to pitch a tent and camp on my property, is that considered a nightly rental?
It depends on the situation. We do have provisions in the code for camping by the owner. If it's under a situation where there's an exchange of dollars for such a stay, it would be subject to the provisions of the ordinance.
Of the ordinance of short-term rental?
Of the transient use of residential properties.
Right. And if I give it away for free?
Well, I think you're, again, kind of asking the question that the previous commenter did, is that we would have to investigate the situation. And if it's ultimately determined to be in violation, then we proceed with the enforcement action. You would have the benefit at that time if we did discover it to be a violation, to provide evidence substantiating that it's not, which we could consider. Ultimately, that is considered by the hearing officer should we not be able to resolve it at the staff level.
Right. It's okay. And if I exchange services or food or other things like we used to do 100 years ago? Harder?
Yeah, the permitting system admittedly is not like it was 100 years ago. There are now health and safety regulations that speak to protecting the public health safety and welfare.
Right.
So a lot
So
of-
these, so everything that you're talking about here is put in together by the people that were voted into the Monterey County to do this sort of thing, correct?
Ultimately, yes, the ordinances are adopted by the Board of Supervisors as the legislative body. They are upon recommendation from staff at that time of the ordinance adoption.
So we have 400 people who've been sitting idling, kind of trying to figure out what's going on over there. And we have a small amount of people complaining about rollies rolling up the sidewalks. What's looks like is required is these 400 people start showing up to meetings in Monterey and wondering why. I mean, I'm in Seaside and I have a short-term rental in Seaside, and we bring in about $50,000 a year to the city of Seaside, which they use very well. But I've now purchased a property inland, which I'm looking at bringing in maybe $150,000 worth of income to the Monterey County, which you can use for homeless, you can use for low-income housing, you can use for other things. But this system looks like it's just going to stall that. And as a businessman, and as someone who
I don't hear a question here. I'm going to have to mute. Thank you for your comments. Next question to V. Torlini.
Yes, Victoria, can you hear me?
Yes, Victoria.
Okay, it's actually a two-pronged question. I sit on our homeowners association board, and I know several years ago, an HOA approval was required for a permit application for short-term rentals. Is this still the case?
There are provisions in the code related to driveways and private driveways. We do not enforce the homeowners association CC&Rs, although they are considered. So if you have CC&Rs, we'd love to see them so we can consider them in applications.
And how would I get the CC&Rs to you?
You can do that to my email. I can share that with you now.
Okay.
It's my last name, Lundquist.
Uh-huh.
So my first letter of my first name is at the end, Lundquist E at co.monterey.ca.us.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is, I think you've already partially answered it, but our present governing documents, the CC&Rs only permit short-term rentals twice a year. And for some reason or other, these two homeowners recently turned up with permits. So are they restricted to 2 times a year, or how will that work in our neighborhood?
Well, again, the county does not enforce the CC&Rs, so that would be subject to your homeowners association. And so the conditions that are integrated within those approvals would be what would be enforced by housing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep. Rosemary? Is it Rose?
Okay, this is her husband, Jeff.
Oh, hi, Jeff.
On the inland areas and the permits approximately 8,000. When they voted on that, or the board come up with that, did they take into account that some people, like you say, get 10,000 a month or 10,000 a night, and some people get 150 a night? And would that be a real fair way to do that? It's kind of like registering a car. You drive a 72 Chevy, it's so much, and you drive a new Mercedes, it's another price. Doesn't seem like it's a very fair way to get a permit.
The fees are based on the staff time to process the applications, and whether the nightly rate is $1,000 or the nightly rate is $100. The process is essentially the same to review an application. The board, when it considers the review of fees, is considering what percentage of staff time should be recovered for the processing of these permits. In situations like this and others, there's obviously some indirect benefit to the county through the collection of tax dollars or other fees. And so the board, and upon a staff recommendation, makes an informed decision about what percentage that is. I don't have the percentages of staff time to know, but I would also say that those fees don't simply go to the Housing and Community Development Department, that they also go to other agencies that have a part in the review. For example, the Environmental Health Bureau as a component of those fees, the County Council's office as a component of those fees. So that, you know, $8,000 is also funding other agencies' reviews of these applications.
In my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, but wouldn't it be a more fair way to do it by the price of the night, and somebody has to pay a little more, but I'm paying the same price as the guy that gets 10,000 a night, and he could easily afford the 8,000.
I appreciate that comment, but as I shared, the fees that we currently have in place are based on the staff time to process applications, which are no different from $100 night stay to $1,000 night stay.
Just okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Kathleen?
I just want to clarify, did you state that if the rental is detached, a detached room, not within the house, you still cannot rent it over 30 days?
There are provisions for accessory dwelling units that would restrict it from a less than 30-day stay.
How would I find out what those are?
I'm good. The other speaker, I believe it was Jeff, is going to, well, you know what, I tell you this, I will, if you're on our mailing list for short-term rentals, I will send an email out to everyone on that list with the citation for that prohibition.
Okay. And so if I were to rent it for 4 or 5 months to say contract staff for the hospital, that's not going to be under this purview.
No, anything longer than 30 days is accepted.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Craig.
Hey, Eric, thanks so much for putting this together. First of all, appreciate it. And thank you, Mary, for being on the call. But my question is pretty simple, straightforward. Can you tell us how many permits, approved permits there are for the transient rentals in the county? And then secondly, a question for Josh would be, how many known violations are we working on right now? If you can share that number with us.
Last I checked, we had a little over, I believe it was 25 that were approved for the transit use of residential properties for remuneration.
Excuse me, I couldn't hear that. Was it 25?
I believe it's about 25, give or take.
Okay.
Hi, Craig, this is Josh. I don't have a number for you on how many cases we have related exactly just to STRs. Sometimes they're combined with noise. Sometimes they're combined with building violations. And so that's some research I'd have to do to see which ones are STRs only. But that is information I can get, just I don't have it right now.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Robert Nielsen.
Okay, Eric, Robert Nielsen here. First of all, thank you for putting on this meeting. I have two related questions. The first one I think may have been partially answered. in response to Craig's question, and that is that I've gone onto the Housing and Community Development page on the county website and looked at, there's a clicking on an item for approved and pending STR and B&B applications. And I added them all up. There's about 70 plus, it seems like. So would it be fair then to conclude that of all the hundreds of short-term rentals that are in the two areas that we're talking about in the county, this is it? This is the only number that's currently in process or having received a permit?
Yes, that's correct. In your numbers about what I'm knowledgeable of two. I suspect that, some of these code enforcement actions will cease operations and not seek the proper permits.
Okay.
And others may.
Okay, and so that in part then dovetails with your saying there's 25 or so permits right now. Related question, Eric, is does the current ordinance make a distinction between an owner occupied or an absentee landlord situation for an STR?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, the transient use of residential properties for remuneration does not make a distinction. So if it's an absentee owner that applied for and obtained a permit for that use, they can continue to use. If it's a owner that lives at the property that has also obtained that same entitlement, they can operate under those conditions. There is no distinction whether they're living on property or off property, but they do need to have a property manager in proximity to monitor.
Okay, so that in other words, we've had someone move into our neighborhood across the street. I think the owners are in Silicon Valley, and people started showing up on weekends. And I looked at the list. They're certainly not on the permit list. And so I guess which then goes back to underscore, I guess, the statement that it doesn't matter whether you're living on the property and renting out a cottage or something on your property on the one hand, or you're living up in Silicon Valley on the other. It's still the same set of requirements.
Yes, but there, like I mentioned, a condition is incorporated that requires a property manager to be in close proximity in order to help mitigate potential nuisances.
Okay, thank you.
Should they get the approval? It sounds like in your situation, they're not currently.
No, I don't think I don't know. I don't see them on the list. Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Let's move on to David. Is this I think we heard you before. Is this another question?
Yes, it is. What do you see as the impact on tax revenue with so much TOT just drying up, and on tourism with this enforcement rolling out?
We haven't assessed that. That is not in our review authority. We have been directed to enforce the regulations within. Is that a subsequent question?
Not for the moment. I mean, and I guess I wasn't clear earlier. What is the proposed new ordinances that had been talked about? What's the current status of those?
I don't want to go into it, but I'm happy to share with you that the plan is by the end of the year that those will be considered by the Board of Supervisors.
So if you had if you get a permit under the old, the $8,000 permit, then you would not need another permit if new ordinances come up, right?
That's correct. You'd be vested under that entitlement.
Okay.
Thank you, David. Let's move on to Desiree.
Hello, Desiree Gillingham here. I noticed that there is anxiety from people. It's like we're entering into the murkiness of bureaucracy and everybody's a little bit anxious. My particular question is finding a facilitator. I've been doing this for 12 years, never had a complaint. and have applied for the permit, got all the information. It's like, holy Jesus. It's intimidating. It's a little above my skill level. I don't want to step wrong. I need advice. How come if you are building something, you can have an attorney or an architect or a building designer to help? Who is the person, the facilitator, the guide for this?
I would rely on your planner. It sounds like you've applied and your planner has likely been assigned or will be assigned. They are public servants and they're there to help you.
You mean like Christina Vu is my, so if I say, how do I do this plot plan thing that you're asking for? How does she help?
She can instruct you on the details. We actually have a informational sheet or a guideline that provides information on what a site plan should include. And so you can provide that to her and she can review it and then work with you to get it to a level that will provide the information necessary for the review authority to make the findings necessary to consider.
You know, it's kind of weird if you are, negotiating with the lion to find out how to live. You really need an outside person. She is you guys. Do you hear what I'm saying? I don't mean to be rude or mean, but an outside facilitator, advisor, Christina Vu has been very kind to me, but I don't want to step on her toes and ask her things that are outside of her being a company person. She works for the county.
She works for the county, but we're public servants. We're here to serve all of the residents and visitors of the county. So if you need help through the process, don't hesitate to reach out to her or to I or to others here. We're here to serve all the residents.
Okay. The other thing Christina Vu told me, and this is very interesting and helpful, I think, about 2 Carmel Valley STR applications that are coming up to the Planning Commission. And the dates, I think, are February 25th, which is weirdly a Saturday, and March 8th. Are those still happening? And would they be informative for us to go and sit in on and hear what's happening?
There are 2 items coming up on March 8th. There was one considered by the Planning Commission on the 22nd, which was this week. So that's since passed.
Okay. Oh, she wrote here 25th. Okay. So there's 2 coming up on March 8th.
Correct.
And that is in Salinas.
It is in Salinas at the Schilling Place, which is 1441 Schilling Place, or there is a Zoom link. We're doing a hybrid meeting. Our Planning Commission will be in person, but you can always listen in via Zoom.
And how does one get an invitation to the Zoom meeting of that?
The agendas are posted on the county's website. If you navigate.
Oh yeah, the website. Yeah, love that, man. That was fun. Okay, thank you for the information.
You're welcome. And if you want to get placed on a notification list, you can send us your email too, and we'll put you on the notification list if you're not already there.
Oh, and I do that by just writing to you, Eric?
Yeah, you can send me an email. Say I'd like to be put on the notification list for any project that's being considered by the Planning Commission for short-term rentals.
Brilliant. I will do that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Jeff Hawkins.
Yes, Eric, I had a follow-up question on CCRs. If a neighborhood association provides those CCNRs to you, you answered that you aren't an enforcer for those CCNRs, but are you obligated to provide those CCNRs to those people at that particular time? In other words, we provide the CCNRs to all new homeowners as well as older ones. But as you know, many people don't read them too well, but it would be applicable at the time that they submit a permit to see whether or not there are any restrictions regarding STRs within their HOA.
My suggestion for the HOA would be to, upon receiving notification, and we can put you on the list if you're not already on the list to receive notification of projects occurring within the association, is to submit a letter indicating that and reminding the applicant that there are provisions within your CCRs, that letter or that document will then become public and included with the packet. And so then they will be informed of that. I think that's the best way to get that information to the applicant.
Thank you, Eric.
Welcome. Jack Britton.
Hi, Eric. Thanks for your time. And I know you have it's a tough job, so thank you for your efforts. The question I have is the permits that are being granted now in all of your efforts to grant them. What are those permits going to look like when the eventual new ordinance is adopted? Is there a plan for that?
There is a plan, as the previous speaker indicated and alluded to. If you're vested within that entitlement, you are vested for the terms and conditions of that permit. Without going too far into the draft ordinances, there is contemplation of how those will be handled under a new ordinance.
So we don't know what that means with the new ordinance then?
We don't, because it hasn't been considered yet by the board. So it would only be speculating.
How many new permits in both coastal and inland zones have been granted in the past 12 months? You know?
Well, like I said, I think we have a little over 25 that have been approved throughout.
That's total though, but what's past 12 months? Do you know?
I think we have a handful, 5. I don't have the exact number, but that's my recollection.
And what about coastal?
Coastal, we have not considered any recently.
Okay. All right. Yep. That's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. I see Jones.
Yeah, I have a question for low-income families that are interested in getting a permit for a modest small unit. Are there any financial tools or loans available to help pay over time for the permit?
We do not have any incentives this time.
Hey, you just have to pay it all at once?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
David?
Yeah, something you just said. If we go ahead, apply for a permit, get the current permit, did you just say when new regulations come out, it's not decided what the status of those current permits will be? Meaning we just spent the $8,000 and then find out it's not permanent, that transfers with the property, it's a completely different thing after spending all the time and money?
No. I believe the speaker was indicating if there was, and although he didn't say, this conversation has come up in the past, whether there'd be the ability to, for lack of a better word, roll over a permit into a new ordinance. The difference being that the transient use of residential properties has certain limitations on it. One of those being that they can't rent a property for less than 7 days. Presumably, and we don't know yet, but potentially the ordinance could allow a lesser amount of nightly stays. So one that receives a transient use of residential properties for remuneration permit may want to have a lessened process because they did just go through that process in order to reduce their minimum nightly stay. So I think that's what the last speaker was referring to. But to your point, once the permit is received, it is entitled, it is vested under the terms of that particular permit.
Right. And the current permit terms are permanent and transfer with the property, correct?
They are.
Thanks.
See, John?
Hi, thank you, Eric. Thank you, Supervisor Adams, and thank you all these 95 people that are gathered to find out information about this. I think it's great. My question's for Josh. It goes back to the prioritizing of enforcement. I understand that TOT non-payers will be first, and then second, when you get into the broad enforcement, of the 25 permits issued, they'll still be limited to a 7-day rental through this 90-day courtesy notice and NOV, right? And will
So
they be, where are they in the prioritization? The existing permitted?
So if I understand your question, you're talking about the existing permitted residences that have the permit for the transient use for remuneration. There would be no enforcement action on those because they have a permit.
Josh, I think what John is asking is if there's a violation of their conditions.
Oh, of their conditions?
That is if they're, say, renting less than 7 days,
Okay.
for instance.
Okay, I misunderstood. Thank you, John.
And that would be, sorry if I may interrupt, that would fall into a third grouping, if you will. We would enforce those not in priority, but as the workload and the staffing levels permit than the general caseload.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all for your questions. Those were good. I will be following up on a couple of them. And it looks like I'm going to receive a request to be put for some speakers to be put on our mailing list, which is great. And others, please feel free to do that should you like to do that. I will be following up with the provisions for accessory dwelling units. And I do see Sean and just went up, so let's go to Sean. Sean.
Hi, Sean. I just have, hi, Eric. Thanks for your time. I appreciate the clarification on everything. And I had a question about what's the protocol for noise ordinance? Is it based on the decibel level applied by the county, and how is that monitored and applied to the sheriff? Do they have a monitoring system, like a calibrated noise system to monitor, or how do they determine if there's noise or not? And is there a county decibel level?
Josh, would you like to speak to that?
So, hi, this is Josh again. So after 9 o'clock at night, the decibel level isn't the criteria. It's for, is it clearly audible from 50 feet away from the noise producing device? So anytime after 9 o'clock, if you can hear whatever the music is, say if it's a party, if it's louder than 50 feet from whatever's producing that noise, then that would be a violation.
Oh, and that would include people talking outside? I mean, not just talking outside? Or?
I would have to read it exactly, but I believe so. If there's like a loud party,
Okay.
and it can be heard more than 50 feet from that would be a violation, but I can double check that for you.
Okay, thanks, Josh. I appreciate that.
John, I would just add that our ordinance was recently revised, and it does provide for a warning to operators or residents of properties within the county. And so our code compliance staff has been meeting with property owners, educating them, issuing a warning, and then should the noise continue to persist, then we issue the violations. And that seems to be working in some instances. As Josh pointed out earlier this evening, during the winter time, it does seem to subside a little bit since their gatherings are occurring indoors rather than outdoors.
And Eric, if I could just add that code section for people that are interested, is 10.60.040.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your question, Sean, and others. Greatly appreciate it. And maybe I'll just pause here for a moment at 6:22 and see if anybody else has any last remaining questions of us. If I do see one last, actually there is a couple more here. Is it Raja? Ira. I have that right, Ira?
Oh, sorry. I was wondering what is the difference or definition between ADU or other structure and how do they differ for the permitting?
Sure. An accessory dwelling unit is either an attached or detached independent dwelling unit. The state has provided mandates to the jurisdictions, counties and cities to provide for accessory dwelling units in order to create additional housing opportunities. Those dwelling units do not need to meet the density requirements of the general plan or the zoning. And so the intent is to provide a housing unit that is affordable by design because of its size limitations. There are certain size limitations depending on your zone and your location with the county, maximum either being 800 or 1,200 square feet. So if you are permitted for an accessory dwelling unit under those provisions, that's what differentiates an accessory from the primary dwelling unit on a property. There are other types of units out there that exist. There are guest units. There are also caretakers units. There's employee housing, but ADUs are very specific by definition and design.
Thank you.
Vaughn?
Yeah, I heard you refer to a limit of, well, a minimum of 7 nights per rental. Are there any other limitations like how many rentals per year, etc.?
There are other standards, and like I said, they're discretionary actions. So the numbers of stays through year may be decided by the appropriate authority. I do know of one circumstance where the zoning administrator set a number of stays for a particular year as a means to mitigate some concerns that were brought up by the nature of that application.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Okay, seeing no other questions, I would like to give another opportunity for Supervisor Adams if she would like to say any remarks in closing based on the questions that we've heard or other comments.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you to Josh very much for this. I think that it's become clear that there are a lot of people who probably are operating under the radar screen. They're short-term rentals. And I so appreciate the people who brought forth questions to, I felt, try to get information on how they are going to be able to come into compliance. The situation is that it has been going along and a number of people have not had any problems. But sadly, there are so many people within the short-term vacation rental world who have been causing major problems for neighborhoods. And those are the people that we have got to ferret out. And I think that this evening has once again brought in the good people. And I think that my hope is that the people who are operating short-term rentals without going through the proper process will really reconsider and come into the fold, because we now have staff who are going to be helpful as far as the enforcement. But in addition to that, as Eric had mentioned, if we get to the point where everyone is coming forward and wants to get their permit, if we do not have enough staff to process all of those, we'll be able to bring in people who will be able to get that done. We would not, forgive me if I'm speaking over you, Eric, but in my mind, I cannot imagine that we would allow ourselves to get in a situation where we're going to have people waiting 2 years, 3 years to get a permit. That simply wouldn't happen. Since Eric has been on board, we have made such an extreme effort to really, throughout the entire department, to clear out these long waited permits for a variety of issues. And we've done I'd say that rather gloriously, but Eric and his team have done a really good job of doing that. And I do not see us changing for that. The last thing that I want to say is about ADUs. When the state of California passed the law to allow additional accessory dwelling units on properties, it was made so very, very clear that this was to help us address the unsheltered problem that we have. The fact that in our community, it is so expensive to find housing, that's what the whole purpose of accessory dwelling units was for. And it was very, very clear that they are not to be used as short-term rentals. That is absolutely clear. So I don't think that the fines are any higher if it is an ADU being used for such, but I can simply tell you that the whole premise behind the ADU process was to help many people who are homeless in our community. So I just wanted to make those comments as well, and just to thank everyone for your participation. And I think when 88 people still hanging on, I know that this is an important subject. So I'll flip it back to you, Eric, with great deal of thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor. It is a we couldn't do it without the support from the board. So I consider this not only the board of supervisors, staff, but also the public too. It is a community that brings these ordinances forward. We may not always agree on them, but it's something that needs to be done, and we are processing the enforcement now, as well as considering the ordinances later. But all those things will be very transparent and clear to all of us through those public processes. So I thank you all for participating tonight. And should you have any questions of myself, I gave the email. It's available on the website. I'm always happy to respond via email or phone call. And Josh and the rest of the code compliance team is happy to help as well. So thank you all for participating tonight. And
Eric, I do see one other question at this time.
I don't see another question. But if that speaker didn't get her question answered, oh, Jennifer. Jennifer, I see your hand up. Before we close tonight, we'll give you one last opportunity to ask a question.
Hi, Eric. Thank you for hosting this Zoom tonight to clarify and explain a lot of information regarding the short-term rental issue in our communities. And I just raised my hand last second, and I thank you for thank you, John, for seeing that, and Eric for letting me ask this question. I just really wanted to clarify the ordinance, the part of the ordinance I'm not quite understanding. Is there a distinction between a rental for more than 7-day rental and less than 7 days?
Our current ordinance does not currently provide for less than 7 days unless you are considered a bed and breakfast. And the and both of those types of permits have very distinct criteria. So you'd want to look at the regulations to understand what you would fit under. You know, typically the bed and breakfast is one that serves food, and therefore you're needing to get health permits, and you're having to satisfy the California retail food law. Okay. There are also some other provisions that are associated with the bed and breakfast with respect to on-site. You know, it's a trend that we don't see too typically anymore, but the code still provides opportunity for that. Otherwise, the transit use of residential properties does have a limitation on minimum of 7 nights.
So if somebody is advertising on Airbnb and allowing people to stay for 2 nights as a short-term rental over Airbnb, they wouldn't even be able to be permitted for that usage? Is that what you're saying?
If they were permitted and they're advertising and it's found to be fact, then they would be in violation of their use permit and subject to code compliance efforts, abatement, which we would get them to correct that. Or if they did not correct it, there is possible for revocation of their entitlement.
Okay, so somebody could get an administrative permit for an Airbnb. Would that be appropriate? Or
the Airbnb is just the booking service. So if they're continuing to operate under their conditions of approval, that they can book on Airbnb.
Okay, I got you. So they would be able to get a permit for less than 7 days then?
No, not under our current regulation.
Okay, so if somebody is operating this sort of business, on Airbnb where they're renting for 2 nights or 3 nights, they're not only in violation, or they're in violation of the ordinance, and they wouldn't be able to get a permit as the ordinance stands now. Anyway, that's what it sounds like.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay. Thank you all again so much for participating tonight. And I hope you all have a great evening, and I'm sure we'll all be talking soon.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Take care.